Hey, what's up, Internet? My name is Ryan Holmberg, and today I'm going to show you my new versions of the Z-Drum patch. Um, the first version that I made had an internal sequencer meant to control the triggers, micro timing, and automation, and this version does not have an internal sequencer, and it is meant to receive MIDI from an external device. In this case, I'm using digitone, and the first version that I'm going to show you is more FM focused. The snare and kick have two oscillators and FM features, and the second version, the snare still has FM, but the kick has distortion instead. So we'll get into that second one in a minute. So for both these patches, you'll only be focusing on the first 5 pages. The first one is the kick parameters, then you got the snare parameters, the hi-hat, your MIDI inputs, and then the value modules that are leading to all the envelopes to trigger the sounds. And then the last page, there's an audio input to allow audio to pass through the pedal. And then these 3 modules, which are 2 VCAs and an audio balance. You'll really only be focusing on the outputs if you happen to need this, but I put these here so that you can route the individual sounds out of different outputs if you need. Like if you want the kick to only go out of one output, you could delete one of these connections and then send the snare and hi-hat out of the other one if that is something you need to do for whatever reason. So yeah, that's the last page. And then for the MIDI trigger inputs, what I've done is I've set it up to, for each of these modules, they're all on channel 1, and then I've set them up to only receive one specific MIDI note. So for example, this is C, I'm not sure what number, but it's note 60, and then 61 and 62. So if you're wondering why all the other notes don't trigger these sounds, that's why. It's set up to only receive one note. And that way you can use only one channel to trigger all these sounds just by sequencing different notes on the sequencer. And the way I've done that is by going into the settings of each module, and I've set the high note and the low note to note 60 so that nothing above that or below that will be received for this module. So just note 60. And then for the snare, I've done the same thing, but with note 61. And then here, same thing, note 62. If that's not how you want it to be, it's easy to just go into these settings and then change this, change these 2 settings to whatever note number you want. Or you can set them all to different channels, you know, go crazy with it. But that's just how it is by default. 60, 61, 62. And the gate outputs are going to these value modules. And then these value modules are each going to the respective envelopes that are controlling each drum sound. So that's the trigger page. And then for the parameters, I'll start with the bottom row. These turn on and off the different elements of the sounds. So this one would be oscillator 1, oscillator 2. This is the FM from oscillator 2 going into oscillator 1. This is the feedback for oscillator 2, and then this is the noise section. So the way I have it set up is there's 2 oscillators total for the voice, but I've routed it in a way where you can hear the FM from oscillator 2 going into oscillator 1, but you can also hear oscillator 2 separately. So if you want to only hear 2 oscillators, you would turn off the FM feature, and then if you only want to hear the FM of oscillator 1 or oscillator 2 going into 1, then you would turn off the second one so you're not hearing the dry second oscillator. But you can also have all 3 enabled so that you're hearing the FM from the first oscillator and then also the dry second oscillator. So you can just turn these on and off depending on what you feel like sounds good. And then this green one is the feedback parameter, where the second oscillator is going back into itself, its own FM input. And then this pink one turns on and off the noise section here. So for oscillator 1, you got volume, decay, And then this on and off switch changes the decay slope of the decay slope. When it's off by default, it's exponential, like more of a curve. And then when you turn it on, it's linear, so it's like straight down. I usually leave it off because I like more of a sharp transient. Then you got the pitch of oscillator 1, the beater amount and speed, which is a fast pitch envelope, and then a slow pitch envelope, which is more meant for crafting like the body of the sound. And then for the second row, you have oscillator 2 volume, the FM volume. So you have separate volumes for hearing the dry second oscillator and then hearing how much that oscillator is modulating the first one. Your decay, which it's the same oscillator, so it's the same decay. And then another slope parameter, exponential and linear. You got your pitch, and then another pitch envelope for this oscillator, and then your feedback level. And then for the noise section, it's noise going into a bandpass filter. You got your volume, frequency, resonance, and decay. So that's pretty simple. And then down on the right, you got your trigger. So that is pretty much it for the FM kick voice. And then for the snare, it's honestly pretty much the same exact thing, except I've set higher pitch ranges for each just because that's more what you would do for a snare. But yeah, you got volume. Actually, no. Okay, so top left, master volume for all of the elements of the snare here. Then you got oscillator 1 volume, your decay, your exponential linear, pitch, pitch envelope. Actually, it's a little different because there's only one pitch envelope here instead of 2 on the kick. You got oscillator 2, your FM level, which is routed the same as the kick, I mean. And then you got your decay, exponential linear, your pitch envelope, and your pitch of the oscillator, and your FM amount. And then you've got your snare noise, which is a little different from the kick. You got your frequency, resonance, decay, another exponential linear control, and then I've added this other parameter here, which is basically a really fast square wave LFO that is modulating the volume of the noise in a way that's supposed to kind of emulate physical snares. So the more you turn up I call it rattle, I don't really know what else to call it, but the more you turn up the rattle, the more you'll hear it affecting the noise. And then the rattle speed is, it doesn't change the speed of the LFO that much, but all the way down it'll be slower, and then all the way up it's as fast as it goes. I tend to put this rattle amount towards the middle to make it sound more natural, but I don't know, I just thought it helped a little bit with the subtle sound design benefits there. And then you got the same turning on and off each element here with your oscillator 1, oscillator 2, the FM of oscillator 2 going into 1, your feedback, your noise, and then here I've put master volume of the whole patch, and then another trigger to trigger the snare. And then third page, you got your hi-hat parameters, which is volume, pitch, resonance, which the hi-hat is just a noise going into a bandpass. So you got your resonance, and then I've added a ring modulator, which I thought helped a bit with the tone of it. So here you got your dry wet mix, so all the way to the left you're not hearing the ring mod at all, and then the more you go to the right, the more the ring mod is introduced, and then your ring mod frequency at the end. And at the bottom you got an attack parameter which can make the hi-hat sound more like a shaker, and if you automate that, it can be kind of convincing. I was surprised with the kind of shakers I was able to make with it. And then I have 2 volume decays. I have a transient decay, which is a really fast volume decay, and then I have a tail decay, which is a slower one, so you can kind of shape your transient with the first one and then shape how much it fades out. And then you have the volume amount of the tail. So the transient's going to be the same volume, or depending on the volume you set here, the overall volume. But then the tail, since it's the same VCA being modulated, this is like the volume of the tail, so that you can kind of make it more subtle if you turn it down. And I don't know, you can play with that. I just thought it was helpful to add that in there. And then put another rattle amount. So I don't have a rattle amount speed here. The speed is going to be the same speed from the snare parameter. I didn't have enough CPU to give it its own LFO, but at least you have the amount control here. And I thought that was helpful for the just making the tail of the hi-hat sound a little more realistic in some cases. And then your trigger. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the parameters. And then as for assigning MIDI CC to these parameters, if you're not familiar with that, Zoia does have MIDI learn. That's how I would recommend attaching, or how I would recommend assigning these things. So let's just say I want to do the kick decay. You would select the parameter, hit Shift, then star, and then you'll see asterisks go below that note. And then you want to back out so you're not selecting anything, and then hit Shift star 2 times, and then click the encoder, go left, and then the first MIDI CC that Zoia receives will show up here, and then it'll automatically be assigned to that parameter. But it does also have to be the same MIDI channel that Zoia is set to receive. It's called the star channel. So if you go to Shift Gear, scroll down a little bit, so starred CC channel, I have it set to 1, but if you want to use a different channel, you can change that. Just make sure that you're using the same channel there, because it won't assign if it's not on the same one. And yeah, so I think that's pretty much it for the FM version. And the distortion version is pretty much, there's a lot of similarities, except the kick doesn't have any FM parameters. It's just one oscillator. It still has the noise, which can be used for like transients or just beefing up the bottom or the body of the sound. And then you got a distortion input gain and your overall distortion volume. And then instead of FM on and off switches, you have distortion on and off. And then for the snare, it is exactly the same. And the hi-hat, it is exactly the same. So, and then same for the triggers, and same for, setting your routing for the outputs and whatnot. And then also, I put the distortion on this page so that I wouldn't mess with the volumes here, because that's what the value modules on the first page do. But in case you wanted to change the distortion type, you can just go into there and mess with that, depending on which one you like better. And I think that is it. Sorry for making such a long video. I tried to talk as fast as I could to get through it, but it's just kind of a complex patch, and I wanted to get through everything. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer it. Just let me know, and I hope you enjoy it.